the amazing women that we have to kind of chat with this evening. And I have some questions that we're going to be walking through. And then, as I mentioned, you're also welcome and encouraged to put additional questions in the chat if you have them. So starting out, we're going to begin with what is the most rewarding thing about being a contractor? And I'll actually also ask you to include anything you want about your experience that I failed to highlight in the introduction. And let's start out with Bryn. So what's the most rewarding thing that you think about being a contractor?
So there are so many rewarding aspects of being a contractor, but one of the most rewarding is that over time, you get to see what you've built. What we build lasts generations, and it impacts how people live and commute and travel. And that's incredibly rewarding. And it also gives me the opportunity to work with some really incredible people, including other contractors, customers, our own employees, and the owners. And it's a full gamut, which is really neat.
Thank you very much. And Amber, how about you? What would you say on the topic of the most rewarding aspects?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Bryn about the sort of that sense of fulfillment that you get from, being in construction is a very tangible industry. So you literally can walk away every day and see more progress on what you've been working towards. So being the contractor, you, as opposed to being, in my experience, having started out as a carpenter, you're kind of thrust in at different phases, framing and trim and different things. But as the contractor, I get to see the project from start to finish. And that's incredibly rewarding to be involved with architects and, in my case, homeowners. As Mary mentioned, I work in residential remodeling. So kind of my feedback and experience will all be through the lens of working on single family homes. But for me, it's being involved at the get-go with homeowners, architects, designers, sometimes bringing in subcontractors for some pre-construction feedback, depending on the project, all the way through the final phase of the job and getting to walk through and see it all finished is incredibly fulfilling. And I would just say, having also worked in the office as an estimator or project manager, when I was not my own business owner or contractor and worked for other contractors, I never had that freedom to have the final say in something that's really important to me is which subcontractors are working on my projects. So maybe as an estimator, I'd spent a lot of time throughout the bid process working with specific electricians or tilers or flooring contractors, and at the end of the day, ultimately someone else is making the final decision on who, if we were awarded the project, which of the subcontractors we would give it to. And now I have control over that, and I think all types of construction and other industries outside of construction are very much relationship based and relationship oriented on how successful and kind of happy everyone is. So hugely important to me is my team around me and having complete control over who my subcontractors are that I team up with. So that's been very rewarding to have that sort of control.
That is totally interesting. One of the things I did before Teichert was a study on women-founded firms. And one of the things that was totally interesting that both of you have mentioned is control over your own work and saying, I want to create the environment that I want, work with the people I want to work with. It's one of the reasons that we start businesses. Cindy, what would you say? Do you have some similar or different thoughts to what these two shared?
I very similar, but also, the flexibility, kind of like what Amber was saying, you get to do whatever aspect you want to work on, of course, a lot more responsibility because, it's all falls on you. But again, like you were just saying, Mary, you've got the control aspect. And there are so many different facets of construction that you can get into. You can kind of follow your passion, whether you want to get into remodeling versus doing commercial work, being somebody that just is more of a repair person for homeowners, or, like I work for the major home builders. So, you can kind of find your niche of what aspect you like to work on and be able to expand on that. Yeah, it gives you, like I said, a lot of flexibility.
That's a great point. And I think to your point also about the different kinds of contracting, I think one of the fun things about this group is what different types of work you all three do. So working with home builders or working directly with homeowners or working on public works contracts and doing structure stuff, all of them have licensing implications and can be women founded or minority founded firms, which is pretty cool. You know, one of the questions that I didn't preview with anyone, and so I'm just thinking of it as you're going, is what led you to do this? Like, why did you think, gosh, I've, you know, been doing this as an individual capacity or in a different role for some period of time, and now I want to start my own company? But actually, I think it's fascinating what you've all mentioned about what are the neat things about this type of work. So I wonder if any of you can share your story about how you decided to start your own business or go into this for yourself.
I can give you some background. I was actually born and raised in the construction industry, and my father had always told both my brother and I that if we were ever interested in working with him, that we needed to go out and find another job in another industry. And if we ever wanted to come back, then, you know, we can come back. And so I actually, after graduating college, I went and I'm in Southern California, moved to Los Angeles and started working in contracts for both MGM and Paramount. And I managed international, they were called output contracts with different stations and movie theaters around the world. And I loved it. I thought that it would be, you know, I could do something like that for the rest of my life. And then it started, the rewards and the drama that came with kind of making movies didn't align with kind of my value system. And so I ended up going back, and I was working with my father for a while, and it all goes back to building and construction and the backbone of how, I mean, this may seem dramatic, but you're really impacting how people live, and that was much more rewarding for me. And so that was how I switched over, and then I started my own business. But
that's very cool. How about you, Cindy? I saw you unmuted too.
Oh, well, yeah, my mother had owned her own business, so that never intimidated me. And I did get my college degree in business administration, so I was very comfortable with that aspect of the business of construction, because there is a lot to the construction business besides the actual work, and having that control, you know, to go along with it, that's, you know, made me feel very comfortable. I had enough experience, practical experience, to qualify for my license from when I was in high school, and one of my relatives had a tile construction business. And so I did enough of that. And then with my college degree, was able to qualify, you know, to get my own license. But yeah, you kind of have to start somewhere. And yeah, that's what it was all about for me.
Well, that's cool. And that's a good point on the experience. I think, Amber, you'd also mentioned having some different ranges of experience helped you get started on this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, as far as kind of what led me specifically to deciding to get my license was, you know, originally working in the field and kind of worked my way up to being a lead carpenter. And then I realized, you know, I really enjoyed building. I really enjoyed being a carpenter. I still do when I have the chance to put my bags on. But I realized that, you know, whatever aspect of construction you're in, when you're in the field working, there's kind of a ticking timeline of how long your body can handle that. And I knew at some point, I don't know when it would happen, but at some point in my career, if I wanted to continue working in construction, I would need to transition to another position to keep working, or heaven forbid, if, you know, which is incredibly, unfortunately, not incredibly likely, but it's not unlikely to get an injury in this line of work. So, you know, if you have an injury that keeps you from being able to work in the field, maybe you're having to transition to something sooner than you expected. I basically looked for any opportunity. Once I had kind of gotten what I felt was a good rounded amount of time spent in the field, getting field experience, I had an opportunity from the contractor I was working for. They needed a second estimator in the office. And I thought, you know, maybe I can try out estimating. Maybe that's what I could do long-term. You know, I at that point wasn't thinking about getting my license, but once I moved in the office and started training and became one of the estimators and did that for a few years, I started being exposed to more and more aspects of sort of by default, by being in the office and being more in sort of the pre-construction phase. I started getting a lot more exposed to the different phases of what happens in the process of a home remodel. And I started to have this desire to learn all of it. I'm the kind of person who I like to wear a lot of hats. I don't like being bored at work, which for me means doing a lot of different varieties of tasks. And I pretty quickly realized I think I need to be running my own show because I will never be bored. and it, you know, and I think that was the point when I transitioned to the field, coming from a desire of needing to preserve my body long term, kind of got me to thinking, okay, if I can start a business and get busy enough that I have a crew who, you know, initially the first year I was self-perform, you know, all the self-perform work I was doing myself. But after about a year, I was able to bring on a crew, and that's where I've been able to transition to being bags off again. And I'm now doing all the day-to-day management. So I'm already at the point faster than I anticipated of being able to kind of get myself set up where I'm doing the day-to-day management. And I have a crew that does the field work, which, you know, as things go, sometimes I still go in to help out depending on the project, but that's what kind of led me there.
That is really cool. It's also interesting because you also make the point the field stuff's fun. So
it is.
Yes. You know, that part of it may be attractive to some degree for all of us, and also doing the back office and running things is a lot of fun too. The other things I appreciated that you ladies said also were it's a pretty low drama industry, and it's really fun to see what we do every day. Those are all kind of part of the interest and attraction of this as an industry too. So let's talk a little bit about actually getting a contractor's license, since I definitely appreciate the CSLB sponsorship of this, and the diversity of what you do all is underpinned by having a license in California and in a couple cases Nevada. So as far as what having a license means to you, Cindy, do you want to kick us off with sort of talking a little bit about what's the benefit, or what do you see about having a license?
Well, the benefit is you're working legally. So, and the reason I say that is because it gets very frustrating. That's one of the, well, every industry has, you know, its frustrating aspects, right? And for construction, it's my having to compete with people that are working illegally, don't have their license, paying cash. I'm paying workers' comp, I'm paying payroll taxes, I'm doing all those things. And so I don't have to worry by looking over my shoulder like I'm sure those people do. But on the other hand, when times are rough, when the economy's down and construction activity isn't booming, then we're forced to compete against some of those people, and it can be, you know, very frustrating. But you know, having your license, you have laws that protect you. You have support from you know, even the contractors board. They'll help you with making sure you're writing your contracts properly or whatever. I mean, on their website, they give you all kinds of tips of, you know, making sure that you're protected so you can get payment, you know, learning the lien laws and all those types of things. So, you know, if you're not a licensed contractor, you don't have some of those privileges or whatever backing you up, right? And so that's, yeah, it's very important to have your license and to do whatever repair work you need to do to keep it current, to keep it, you know, active, and make your business successful.
That's cool. Thank you. Yeah, and I would I echo all those things. I think it's interesting, as a general contractor, we hire a lot of subs. And for us, it's really nice to know that there's a certain level of quality and experience you can expect, which is always a benefit as well. Bryn, you want to talk a little bit about that as well, as far as having a license or what that means for you?
Sure. First and foremost, for me, it's a huge sense of accomplishment. I was just super proud once I sat for it and passed it. And I just felt like, you know, this was very rewarding for me. And like what you said, Mary, is it gives others a sense of security and confidence about who they're working with. And knowing that, like Cindy said, when we're following the law, we'll have the proper insurance and that hopefully, you know, people who are licensed know what they're doing, and that's it's a big part of it. So,
can I actually say something to that as well? Yeah, so I think one thing that came to mind for me was kind of having license is also creates just a more equitable relationship in general for the person hiring the contractor and the contractor. So contractors, as much as we study and try to stay on top of everything. There's going to be things that just we aren't fully aware of 100% of what's in the legal portion of it and everything else. But the way everything has been set up is there to protect contractors as well as to protect, in my case, homeowners or the owners, the person hiring the contractor, the clients. And it's done. My small amount of exposure that I've had to it, had with it, and in the process of studying and learning more and partnering with lawyers to help me build my first contract templates, I've kind of learned a lot more, and I will have plenty more to learn still about what laws are in place, state laws, as well as just through contracting, through the CSLB that's in place there, both to protect the contractor or subcontractors and homeowners, owners, clients, the people hiring the contractors. And so it just kind of creates this foundation for a really equitable arrangement that, like Cindy was saying, for a lot of folks who do this off the books or who are unlicensed, it's actually really unfair to the person hiring. I mean, it's definitely risk to the person performing the work, but there's, I think, greater risk if there's so much potential for damage or something to the work being put in place that the owner, the person paying for those services, can't really hold someone liable if they don't have a contract, and you can't have a legal and binding contract without a license. So, and same thing, a homeowner can't just throw any, the person who hires the contractor can't just throw any reason out there and say, you need to come fix this, because there's also laws in place or things in place that protect you as the contractor if it's not actually your responsibility to address something. So it can be a really complicated industry with a lot of whether it's commercial, residential. If you're working on an existing structure, what was from previous work that someone else did versus your work that you put in place, there can be a lot of question marks and unknowns, and having some kind of structure that you start with, which at the very beginning, it's getting your license, just entering into this with kind of full disclosure that everyone's aware of what we're all agreeing to, I think is a really great start for an industry that comes with a lot of liability. So I think it's the only way to get into it really is through getting a license.
That's really well said. You're right. There's a lot of liability on the business side, as well as you had talked earlier about the exposures you have from the safety side. So kind of coming at you from all directions. One of the questions was, what's hard or easy about getting and maintaining a license? And I think probably for the folks in our audience who don't have one yet, it'd be interesting to know what some of those challenges were. Any thoughts on that? And I guess we'll start with Cindy on that one.
Getting and keeping it, was that the question, basically?
I know there's work that went in the first place, but then it's not like you can just get it and stick it on the shelf and that's the end of it.
Well, yeah, definitely. And, like I said, I kind of was able to get multiple licenses. Once I had my tile license, I had a gentleman that had a flooring license, because the way my industry, every industry, right, evolves and changes so much. And you've got to keep up with things, just like solar being added. And, in my case, it started out with tile, and then all of a sudden granite slabs about 20 years ago came into existence. Well, none of those solid surfaces existed. So, I got into that because I could see that to be a trend. And, as a matter of fact, I even had to work with the contractors board at the time, because we started doing it and they didn't know what to do with that new product. They were going to put it under the brick mason's license. And they had told me, well, since you're doing the slabs, maybe you can just show us the experience that you have, and we'll automatically give you whatever that C license is for the brick masons. And trust me, you don't want me to build something structural out of bricks. I do the aesthetics, the pretty stuff, right? So then they decided to put it under our license. And then as time, progressed, a lot of the people in the flooring industry started to get their tile license with the home builders, and the home builders expected you to do everything. So I hired a gentleman, and having him work with me, I got enough experience again to qualify to take that exam over a course of a few years. And then same thing with getting the B license. It evolved because I was working with another gentleman in another little separate business. I started to get building single family homes during that last boom before the big collapse. So working with him again for a few years under his license, and I was able to qualify. And during the recession, I was able to kind of change gears and do a lot of Blackstone purchased all of those foreclosed houses. Well, I was able to be hired as a B contractor because I just got my B license to do that work, because home builders just weren't building homes because of the recession. So, you know, I was able to use my license in different ways to just kind of try to, you know, flow with what the economy was doing, and, you know, make sure that I just stayed on top of all of the laws and proper ways of doing, you know, my workmanship. So, you know, there was never a claim against my license or anything. And so I was able to grow and kind of morph into, you know, different areas of work, but still stay in construction and just stay viable during, you know, the good times and the bad times, because you've got to be able to switch gears and figure out how to keep your employees working. And, you know, you have a lot of people that are on your payroll, and you feel responsible for those families, and, you know, they need to pay their bills and eat, and right. So we all feel, you know, a sense of responsibility. In addition to just keeping the business going, it's also keeping, you know, taking care of your employees.
That is totally true. And maybe, Bryn, do you want to talk to that? You'd sort of highlighted that your feeling of having a family culture has been good for you. And then also kind of interested in your thoughts. Obviously, you're in a different dimension of contracting than Cindy, but a little bit of the scopes of licenses and stuff was pretty interesting. Kind of, what are your thoughts on either of those, I think?
So, yeah, I mean, so I have a Class A license, so which, you know, is interesting because I can technically build bridges, but I can't do any of the residential stuff. I can't lay tile. I can't. So when you're talking about the brick building license, and I get it. You know, I think maintaining a license is, you know, you need to make sure that you're running your business really well, and that you are taking care of your employees, and that you're choosing your subcontractors, if you have any subcontractors, well, and also that you're treating your customers well, right? I mean, as a subcontractor, sometimes we bid as prime, but as a subcontractor most of the time, you know, we want to make the general contractor and the owners look like heroes. And I think it reflects a lot back on just maintaining that license. Yeah, I try to treat everyone like family. Safety is a big deal with maintaining this license and keeping it and getting it going. There's a lot on the line for sure. So you want to keep everybody safe, and it's a tough job. You want to keep them safe, and you want to keep them employed.
Amber, do you have any thoughts you want to add on that?
Yeah, I can speak to, I guess, maybe some of the more literal aspects of the process of getting licensed, if anyone's kind of curious about that. You know, for me personally, I like Mary mentioned, I have a Class B, the general contractor's license. And the hard part that I found really intimidating was, you know, the exam is split into, I'm assuming it's still the same way, the legal portion and the trade portion. And for me, having worked in the field, I was very confident in the trade portion that related to the carpentry aspects. It was a little more intimidating having to study, you know, what's this pattern of bricklaying called versus if the bricks are facing this way and things, you know, there's questions like that can come up. So, but generally I had a much more solid handle in the trade portion. I was more intimidated by the legal portion. And what I had been advised by other friends of mine or people other contractors I knew, was it's worth paying for a study course or some kind of class that you can go to prep yourself. And so I opted not to do an in-person class, but I paid one of these companies that's out there they send you study materials. And this particular one had audio CDs. And, you know, as someone who works in construction in the Bay Area, or probably most urban parts of California, you spend a lot of time driving to and from work every day. And so I would actually spend some time at home flipping through the book, studying, and a lot of time just listening to these CDs over and over to just constantly be giving myself as much prep for the licensing exam as possible, especially the legal portion. As a carpenter who works in the field, you're not exposed to the things that you're required to do as a contractor, statements you have to include in your contract when someone signs a contract with you, things like that. So there was just there is a lot of information to learn, but it's incredibly important information that you need to remember and incorporate into your business. And I found that was a helpful way to introduce myself to it. And I still go back to the book sometimes. And so even though it felt a little overwhelming at the beginning, there are tools and classes and people out there who know that people are totally to this, maybe more green the trade side than the legal side. And I just had one comment as well about the as far as maintaining a license. I actually first got my license as a sole proprietor, which means I didn't incorporate my business. So my business was attached to my social security number. So me, Amber Stitt, I can call my company whatever I want, but ultimately I am the business. And I decided recently last year to incorporate the business, which is a good, separates legal liability from you as an individual. And when I did that, I actually, the licensing board gives you the option to carry over your Amber Stitt's license to the corporation, or the corporation can take out its own new license. And I actually opted to go that route just because I don't know what the future holds. If for some reason I should decide to sell my business, Amber Stitt, could always move out of state, come back and still have my own personal license and not have to resit the exam. So I actually chose to keep my sole proprietor license, which I have active just in the background, even though I'm not functioning as a business under that license. And I was able to take out a new license number without having to resit the exam because I was the representative, the one personal one in my corporation holding that license. So I might be getting kind of way ahead of what some people are looking into, but I just say that as an example of, you may get into it and find you want to restructure restructure how your company is a sole proprietor versus a corporation. And the CSLB has it set up that it was a very easy process for me to transition from being a sole proprietor to a corporation. I found that process to be easy. And I was a little concerned at first that I had created a headache by not incorporating right off the bat. And it was a very smooth transition for me. So even within making changes once you are licensed, there are resources there, and the process is set up to make it kind of easy for you to transition.
I absolutely second what Amber just said. One, take a class, have the resources, read, study, and also I have both my personal license and the incorporated license, two licenses as well. So second everything Amber just said.
So Mary, we have a couple of questions from the audience. One is Sharon Ellis asked, how many licenses are required to run a construction company?
There's a couple questions that I thought were excellent. So I saw that one, and also about holding a Class A and B license at the same time.
Right.
Two things I'll say. One is that, as you can see from these panelists, they have different licenses because they're also doing different kinds of work. So there's a lot about which licenses you need to have, depends on the work you're going to do. What I'd like to do is kind of ask Justin, once we get to that second part of the panel, one of the benefits that we have this evening is that Justin Paddock's with us, who is the licensing chief for the Contractor State License Board, so we can provide a lot of background and detail on these topics. So excellent questions. Justin, can I ask you to cover that when we get to your panel? Cool, awesome.
Absolutely, happy to.
Right on, thank you. Before we close with this group, I'd like to sort of see if you have, and you've offered a few awesome gems already, but if you have advice for folks that haven't decided to make this leap yet, what are advice you have for folks that are considering getting a contractor's license or going into this for themselves? And I guess maybe we'll start with Cindy on that one.
Well, I agree with what Amber and Bryn both were saying as far as, taking the classes. I did for each of my licenses. Just studying the material, just that they don't give you the same questions that you're asked when you sit for the exam, but they're very close and they're definitely the type of questions. So once you feel comfortable answering those, it's well worth the money. And I did the same thing, Amber. I didn't sit for an in-person class. I just got the material and it came with some examples of quite a few examples of test questions. I mean, like a couple of hundred of them, I think. So, not only does it give you the experience of taking a test with those types of questions, but it gives you the confidence that oh yeah, I've got these questions down. So when you do sit for the exam, because it's kind of intimidating, you know, and of course, the first time, like you said, Amber, too, when you get your first license, you have to pass the business portion. So it has some accounting questions, legal questions, that type of thing. And once you pass that, then the computer enables you to proceed on and take the test for whatever exam you're sitting for, whether it be a specialty trade or an A or B license. And then, you know, it tells you right then and there, once you hit the send button, whether you pass or fail. So it's a good feeling that, you know, seeing that, that passed signal come on your computer in the test center for sure. So yeah, that's
some good advice. How about Bryn or Amber? Any advice for folks that are thinking about making the leap?
I would say just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons and understand how to use the license. A lot of people get a license because they must. Obviously, you know, I'm passionate. I love this industry. It allows you to do so much good for not just yourself. You're doing construction for other people. And so if you're interested in it and that's, you like, you know, working with other people and giving back and impacting the world around you, go for it. 100%.
I would say probably one of the most, there's been a number of things that have been really have helped me make that transition successfully, but a really, really big one that helped me a ton that I would recommend is if there's someone in your life that you know who has gotten their license and has been able to, you've been able to sort of witness the process and seen that they're successfully running their company, network with them, check in with them, let them know you're interested in doing it and ask just having someone available. I had a close friend who got his Class B general contractor's license, especially specifically in the field you're going into. So he remodels single family homes. And he went through the process a few years before I did. And it was just a huge help to have someone who had just gone through the process share with me their, you know, no matter how many times you go through it, and I'm sure including the people who've developed, you know, the board who's developed all of this, no one's ever going to remember absolutely everything. So having someone there who's to tell you like, you know what, I forgot to get this and make sure you do this. So definitely networking and finding someone who has gone through it that you can talk to and come to with your questions, who's willing to be available to you is a huge resource. And then I also wanted to say, it seems like maybe a minor thing, but especially just how much I know people can kind of bounce around in jobs in construction, just the very first step of getting licensed, the application process, a really significant portion of it is listing your experience. So if you're early on and thinking about this process, you're going to need, I don't know if it's 6 or plus years of experience. So stay in touch with the folks that you've worked for, your supervisors. It doesn't have to be the owner of the company. So if there's someone, even if they don't work with that company any longer, but they supervised you when you were there, stay in touch with them, ask them like, hey, I'm thinking of getting my license. Let's stay connected. They are going to need to fill out part of your application to vouch for your experience in the field doing that. So it can be a lot. That's something you can't just come up with and try to track down really quickly. So if you have that just kind of all set up and ready to go, that can be one of the more time-consuming parts of the application just to even get down this road. So it's kind of a minor detail, but something to be thinking about ahead of time to stay connected with the folks you're going to want to use as your work sort of references of that portion of the application.
You know, one thing I wanted to add too is the Small Business Administration is a great place to help you to get some financing and get information on getting some capital to get started if you need that. And also the local banks. They're, you know, plethora of information, and especially when the economy is good right now, it's a good time to sit down and talk with them, and they'll tell you, you know, what they're looking for and help you with, you know, filling out some of the paperwork and that type of thing to help you get started financially too.
That's very helpful. And I'll also mention for, as a small plug, our second panel in this series is going to be on the mechanics of starting a business. So we'll have some of those resources that Cindy mentioned for people that are thinking of jumping into this. Those are great words of wisdom. And actually, it's interesting, Amber, your comment on the experience portion. For me, that was one of the ways to know when was I ready to actually get my license, or in my case, you know, I was grandfathered into my company's license, but filling it out and thinking, well, I don't have enough here yet. That's one way to know not ready, just to look at it again in a couple of years. So I think that's cool. Before we close, I wanted to see, since this seminar is really focused on trying to get more women and minorities into it, part of it is just people imagining themselves in that career. And it's one of the reasons I really appreciate all of these panelists and your willingness to be in this today. But I'm wondering if you think there's any dimensions of your experience that you can share with the audience that are the same or different as they would have been if you hadn't been a woman in this case, or, you know, in a minority setting. Do you think there's anything different?
One thing that comes to mind is, I think, you know, it all panned out fine for me, but I can't tell you how many times I've met had random conversations with men who aren't even in construction or doing other things, who I tell them what I do, and they're like, oh yeah, I worked several summers for my dad or my uncle. And, you know, and there's definitely, I had to try really hard to get into the field that I got into. I actually got my start. I responded to a Craigslist ad about a contractor looking to hire a painter. And my experience was that when I was 12, I'd helped my parents paint their house. And for some reason he hired me. So I'm grateful to that contractor. But when I was on that job site, that was the first time I had been exposed to a construction job site, to all the different trades. And I really zeroed in on the carpenters, because carpentry is very involved and hands-on kind of with the whole process. And I ended up kind of at a downtime in the economy, and I ended up getting laid off. He went out of business. So I was just exclusively looking for carpenter jobs to build houses. I wanted to be a carpenter. That I discovered a new passion. That's what I wanted to do. And I had a very difficult time getting callbacks. And then there's another woman at the same time, a friend of mine. Her name is Alexandra. She goes by Alex. And her resume said Alex Chambers, and my resume said Amber Stitt. We had the exact same experience. She'd worked for the same company doing just painting. We got into it at the same time together. She was getting about 5 times as many callbacks for the exact same resume. And she was able to get a job as a carpenter's assistant sooner, which I am very, very grateful for her having gotten that experience. And it just took longer for me. And the only difference on a resume was our names. And, you know, I think one thing that's been difficult is just kind of realizing that, you know, as a woman, to hear someone who didn't even choose to get into construction kind of, and they have no idea what they're saying. There's nothing wrong with the information they're sharing, but to hear them say, oh yeah, I didn't even try and it came to me and I was able to just do this work in the summers. And, you know, I'm not sure it's even something I wanted to do. And it's kind of like, I've really appreciated that, you know, I tried really hard, and it was still hard to get people to want me as a carpenter assistant, willing to make minimum wage. It was still hard to get people to hire me because they had concerns connected with my gender. And so it's something that, you know, it made it harder for me, I think, to get into the field I wanted to do. But then to sort of turn that on a flip side, once you've broken in and you've gotten in there and you work your way up to being someone, I think, well, I wouldn't say work your way up. I think it took a lot of pride in being a craftsperson. And I think that's a very, very rewarding and fulfilling job that for one to be able to do. But when you get to the point where you are the licensed contractor and sort of the face of the company, it now benefits me, I believe, in the residential, single family home residential remodeling world. It benefits me hugely to be a female contractor because there are very few of us. And at least where I work in the Bay Area, and I would imagine this is the case in a lot of places, because a lot of the homeowners, it's often women that I'm working with that are kind of the main people driving design decisions and making, and the main contact person. And every single time on every single project I've ever contracted on, the woman in of the set of the owners has always said, I really appreciate having a female contractor to work with. And that was one of the reasons we chose you. So it's kind of come full circle for me, where it was the reason why it was difficult for me to get into the industry. And now it's become one of the greatest appeals of why people want to partner with me. So that's, I don't know where I'm going with that, but that's just kind of how it's ways that I've seen that specifically played out.
That is totally interesting. Cindy or Bryn, anything you want to add on that topic?
Amber, I respect you so much. One of my biggest weakness is that I didn't start in the field. So if anyone's listening out there and they feel that, you know, oh, I, you know, don't have the education, or I don't have an engineering degree, or my biggest weakness is that I didn't start in the field. And if you're out there and you want to start your own business, or if you want your license, go after it. regardless of whether you have your engineering degree or if you're starting as a painter in the field and moving through the craft. I can't say that enough. The best estimators, project managers, a lot of the executives that I work with, the best ones that have all start in the field. So my biggest weakness is that I didn't start in the field. But
yeah, I agree. That's really cool.
Yeah,
Cindy?
And I did start in the field, but again, that was like more when I was, in high school and beginning of college. But when I got into construction after I graduated, I actually was in retail for a while and did not care for that after I got out of college, and always had wanted to get back into construction, and just things happened in my life that it was going to become possible. But I went into it as owning a business and hiring people. And so I had the background, but I never had to try to go out and get the work like Amber did. So I have a lot of respect for that for sure. But then I also have, a little bit of the prejudice when I've been on job sites where I've had some of the old school men saying, well, let's just wait till your foreman gets here, because I really don't want to explain this a second time, as if I wouldn't understand what he was going to tell me. But that's okay. I get it. We all, that's just the way it is, right? Being a woman. And sometimes that's, you just have to go along with it. So in some ways it helps us, like it has ended up helping Amber. And in some ways it can be a hindrance, and, it's just part of life, right? So you just have to kind of work with it.
Well, part of what I'm hoping for from this series, and probably from the other things that we try to do going forward, is that our industry and our whole state benefits from having more awesome people in contracting, and half of the people in the state are women. One of the things that quote I love from Warren Buffett, he said part of the reason for his success is he only had to compete with half the population. And I think, we need the whole population of people who are interested in building things and seeing the results of their efforts. And to Bryn's point, really helping folks in the traveling public, all of them to think, hey, I could be a contractor. And a lot of those are women. So I'm glad for what we're doing here today. And I'll just make one last plug, is that construction is one of the few industries where women are paid pretty much exactly the same as men. So if you look across the country and say all different kinds of industries, women make something on the order of like 82 cents for every dollar men make. And in construction, it's like 99 cents. We are paid the same as men. And I think that is pretty cool. So very much appreciate all of this, ladies. This was awesome.